Hello everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be looking at the jungle tier list for 1123. So as always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out a ton on the channel. Come by, check out the stream only on Twitch these days around 11:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Usually goes until about 3 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So very friendly, chill community. We'd love to have you out there. And check out the rest of the tier list as well. I've done a support and an ADC tier list on this channel. And then I think I also did a patch notes breakdown. I can't remember if I did the patch notes this time, but I definitely did the tier list this time. And I even did an off-meta tier list for support if you want to try some weird things. Although a lot of those haven't been working out that great on the stream. But they could be fun to try if you want to, try to improve upon them a little bit. But anyways, let's go ahead and get in here. So I think that tankier bruiser type of champs are coming back into the meta a little bit more. It's pretty healthy in the jungle overall. Like there's a pretty good mix of tanks that are doing well and bruisers that are doing well. One theme is kind of the scaling champions are performing a bit better right now because the early scuttle doesn't matter as much, so you lose a little bit of your power early on if you're an early game jungler. And then with the catch-up mechanics, it's a lot harder to snowball and close out games. And so you're seeing scaling champions do a lot better in other roles, things like Vayne, things like the enchanters, the stuff like Soraka and Sona have extremely high win rates right now. And so if you can play something that's going to be a bit tankier, that's going to have some resistances, it's going to be better in some of these longer bruiser fights, it's going to scale a bit better. I think that's kind of where you want to be a lot of the time. So we'll start off with Nunu here. Now, Nunu has one of the highest win rates on here. He's at 54.06, so a little over 54. And he just has a really good kit overall for what's going on in the meta. And I just feel like Nunu in solo queue is just always, going to be a strong champion. He is tanky, so as I mentioned before, that's a really good trait to have right now when you have Sonas and Sorakas. They're able to heal you, especially if you have a self-heal with his Q, and you're going to take Spirit Visage, usually, because don't forget that Spirit Visage also affects how much healing and shielding you receive from your allies, not just your own healing and shielding anymore. So, really, really good combination there. And Nunu is great because he clears the jungle really well, fairly fast. He can take objectives very early, very quickly, so he can get the early dragons. He can get those scuttles early on as well. Now, yeah, they aren't worth as much, but he kills them much faster. I think they have a lot less HP early on as well. And he ganks really well early on, so he can be early game very aggressive. He can snowball off of his snowball, for a terrible pun there. But he does have the capability to be an early game menace, but he can also scale decently well into someone that is, very difficult to kill down the line. So he does benefit from some of those Sunfire changes, where I believe the immolate guarantees you some of those last hits, which is nice. I mean, in the jungle, you're obviously going to get the last hits anyways, but they did give a bit of a bump to Sunfire there, so that's handy. Now, as far as like the runes go, Phase Rush is good. It does allow you to stick to people to guarantee that you're going to get your empowered E for the root into your ultimate. So that is a nice combo. So if you are, very aggressive early on, that's a pretty good build. But I still think that Aftershock is pretty good too. And I'm not sure what the win rate differential is on those. They have about the same win rate, although Phase Rush is picked a lot more. And it just makes you so much tankier. Like, it's so good to have that Aftershock. And then to be able to take Font of Life and then Conditioning and Revitalize is particularly good if you have, like I said, a healer on your team, a Soraka, a Sona, or whatever, because the heals and shields you cast or receive are improved by 10%. So, helps you out with any of those champs that are going to be getting Moonstone and have a bunch of healing built into their kit. So you can go that, and then just secondary go for Celerity and Water Walking, which I really like. It's just, if you go for Phase Rush, you're going to be a lot squishier, and this secondary rune, Nimbus Cloak, is okay, but it's not fantastic.
Hi, Dad.
Hi, Roy. What are you doing? Daddy's working.
I'm looking for the tower for Mommy.
Okay.
And me to play up for a little bit.
Okay.
Do you know where it is?
I don't know where it is. You'll have to look around and see that. Is that it right there? It might be on the arm of the couch right there. Go look over there. Right there. Just on the other side of those clothes. There you go. All right.
Now I'm going to
Okay. Okay, good. So yeah, early game menace, pretty good scaling, great at securing objectives, nice tanky champion. As you can see, he does kind of fall off a little bit past like 25 minutes, but that's still a 52% win rate. And the reason that he does somewhat fall off is because he has a hard time getting access to the backline. So if they have a hard scaling ADC with an enchanter, so like a Lulu Kog'Maw or Yumi Twitch or something like that, it's going to be really hard for him to get to that if there's someone up front who can block that snowball. If they have some sort of tank, I mean, Trundle's like the nightmare scenario because he can just block your engage with his pillar. But if they have a Darius standing in front or a Scion or something that can absorb the snowball, then it can be difficult. But nevertheless, I think he's very strong. Good mixture of potential early game pressure, objective control, and pretty good just mid game utility. So I think that Nunu's really strong, and the win rate reflects that. Graves, if you want something that's going to be a much harder carry type of champion, is a bit better right now. Now, he is getting banned quite a bit. And his win rate's not as impressive as the other ones, but I think that if you play him well, then he can be very strong right now because he's basically a second ADC that's really hard to kill if they have a lot of AD on their team because he still gets a ridiculous amount of free armor just off of his passive. So one of the newer technologies people have been doing is just rushing Ghostblade on him early on, and this is going to give you some better ganking pressure. So gaining that 40% out of combat movement speed, and then in combat, you're able to activate it to get the 20% for 6 seconds. So that's one of the real problems with Graves is it's kind of hard to stick to them because you don't have a lot of CC. You do have the smoke screen, but you really just want to be able to stay on him and land as many auto attacks as you can. And Graves had been going Phase Rush to help out with that, but it looks like more and more people are going Fleet now on him. And I'm not sure what the purpose of that is. I guess it does help you out a little bit with your clears, especially if you're not going to be getting shield bow early on. So I'm not entirely sure what's up with Fleet or how much better it is than the alternatives. Looks like it is significantly better than anything else that he goes. First Strike is like okay, but Fleet for some reason is just tremendously better. It does give you the ability to stick to people a little bit better for that extra movement speed, but I think a lot of it is just kind of the extra healing, the extra sustain to get you through the jungle. You do push units back with your attacks, but then I think they increased the speed on him a while ago. They made it harder for Graves to do his thing in terms of taking no damage in the jungle. So, nevertheless, just going Fleet on him, going for that new technology of Ghostblade seems to be the way to go. Again, that's a significantly higher win rate than most other items. Dustblade's pretty good, but low sample size. So this seems to be the new hotness, just to help you stick to people a little bit better. Mercury Treads in a lot of situations is going to be solid just because you already have a ton of armor. And, getting that tenacity is going to be very good against a lot of CC as well. And then, of course, Shield Bow, I think, is where you want to be second most of the time. And then probably Collector third or Dom's third if they have a lot of tanks. However, Collector does have a much higher win rate. So he's just really good. If you want a lot more scaling, again, you're not going to be pressured as much early. He's okay in an early pressure meta. But he's also really good in a scaling meta. So if you're just able to sit there and power farm, and then once you get your Ghostblade, maybe pressure and get 1 or 2 kills, I think he can be a very strong champ. Now, you are potentially overloading AD if the rest of your team does go AD, but you do have that Lord Dom's option. And he's just going to put out some really high sustained damage, and he's going to be able to duel a lot of these other AD champions. So I think he's good if you want the hard carry option. And then the other two that have kind of risen up on this patch to be premier champs are going to be Warwick and Vi. So Vi is kind of getting the arcane buff is what people have said, but I think she did get a real buff a few patches ago. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I think that the meta's slowing down a bit to where she has time to get to level 6 before she falls too far behind is really good because obviously her ultimate is very strong for ganks once you have it. It's just point click, tons of damage. They can't flash it, you're going to get them. And then the fact that she shreds the armor as well, with your denting blows, it reduces armor by 20%. So and that includes base armor. So that's really good for helping the rest of the AD champions on your team, like your AD carry, also do 20% extra damage. So it's kind of like Jarvan in that sense that it has that utility, but it also takes down objectives really quickly because it does a pretty large percentage of max health as well to things like Baron and Dragon. So pretty good combination. Then a lot of people are going Divine Sunder for just that little bit of extra burst damage plus the survivability, and then of course Sterix, anything that's melee. It's physical damage. You're going to get Sterix basically second, just because it's an absurdly OP item right now. And that does pair together pretty well with Divine Sunder, just because you get that extra health. Now, you could go Gore Drinker as well, but I think more and more people are opting for that Spellblade for that little bit of extra burst damage. So that's been the trend that I've been seeing. So really good. Halo Blades also allows you to do some extra damage when you're dueling people. So very strong champion overall, really good. Level 6 power spike, and then as you can see, once she gets to 25 or 30 minutes, it's really good. I mean, they did something that was like a quality of life, and I remember saying, like, I don't know if this is going to be good or not. It just depends if you're a Vi player. Let me see what that changes really quick. Because I remember it now being something that was kind of... It was a bunch of, like, quality of life stuff that was difficult. Okay, so... What they changed here... Yeah, it was just a bunch of weird crap that's hard to, like, quantify. The following changes are undocumented. It's not known whether they were intentional or not. Okay, so they renamed some stuff. Okay, but here's all the quality of life stuff. So... Her knockup duration changed from 1.4 seconds. Okay, so it's a consistent amount. So if you're point blank, you're going to get an extra like 0.15 out of that in a lot of cases. So that's nice. Self-stun duration is now consistent instead of varying between casts. Okay, so again, don't know. Now consistently knocks up her target when she is 300 units away instead of between knocking them up between 0 and 300 based on 0.25 intervals. Again, very weird under the hood stuff that just, I guess, adds some consistency to what she's doing. But now I guess it's easier to predict for your allies, maybe. Enemies are now knocked back immediately upon contact with her, so it knocks people aside. I guess there was a delay before. So, again, it's hard to figure out exactly how important this is, but apparently it's important enough for about 2%. Knockback changed or increased. You get an extra 0.05 of a second on your knockback. Dash range now extends up to 50 units when you go through a wall. Okay. So now she has an easier time vaulting over walls. Damage and dash distance are now based on exact channeling time instead of every 0.25 seconds. Okay. Targets knocked back immediately upon contact with her. And then bug fix, properly cast, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so, again, doesn't seem like a big deal, but apparently it is. And she's one of the best scaling junglers in the game right now. She has great clear. She has great objective taking potential, right? When you think about Barons, Dragons, she can take Scuttles because her Q is going to knock the shield off of them. She does really high sustained damage. She's tanky. And, of course, she has that free access to the back line, which is very coveted right now because you need to be able to get on that Vayne and tear her up, or whoever the ADC is. If they're ahead, you need to be able to shut that down. So Vi is excellent at that. Really, really good champ. You could definitely make an argument for her being, the absolute top tier. I just have Nunu there a little bit ahead just because he can put more pressure on early. And then Graves just for the hard carry potential there. And then Warwick is another one who has come to light a lot recently, and I think some of this is item changes. Now, he's at 54% as well, which is pretty good. I don't believe there were any patch changes to him specifically, but it's just that Divine Sunder has become a lot stronger. It's come into the meta right now. It's really good with his Q, which is on a low cooldown. And then I think a lot of it is... now, he does kind of start to fall off a little bit later on in the game. But people have started rushing this Titanic Hydra, which I don't think they buffed. They may have a while ago. I can't remember precisely. But just being able to get that extra wave clear early on is going to be pretty handy. And this is such a good ability because Warwick applies on hits whenever he slashes with his ult. So I think he hits, it's either 3 to 5 times. I can't remember when he suppresses somebody. I think he hits them 5 times over like 2 seconds. But either way, each time he hits them, it's going to apply all of this damage, and it applies that wave, that splash damage. So it can actually be really massive AoE teamfight damage if your team doesn't spread out from behind this. So if you like attack their frontliner with your ult and it splashes, 5 times the backline, it's just going to completely shred a team. So it's just that interaction with his ult is really good, and that's what a lot of Warwicks have opted into. People used to go Blade of the Ruined King on him sometimes just because of that on-hit damage or like Wit's End. And now Titanic Hydra has become, the go-to item. And, he benefits very heavily from, a bunch of the healers out there as well just to keep him alive so that he can, just put out really nice sustained damage. He's very, very difficult to kill with his E going on. He has a lot of CC. He's pretty good early on at running down and killing people in YOLO Q. So I just think he's a really solid champion right now overall. But I think a lot of it, my guess is that you have the PTA, which works really well. That also works with his Q. And then you have that interaction with Titanic Hydra being particularly strong. He may have been pretty good before. I don't know. He is someone who definitely benefits from a quieter early game so that he can farm up and get to 6 and start making plays with his ult. Okay, next tier. Now, Kha'zix, some people might have him at the very top tier, and I think if you're boosting or, you're smurfing or whatever, then I do think that Kha'zix, probably is top tier right now. But I've just seen so many Kha'zixes fail where if he doesn't get ahead early or kind of in that mid game, then he tends to fall off. So, like, right here is kind of bad, but if you do snowball pretty hard, you can do very well into late game. Now, he is one of the few people that I think actually uses First Strike really well. I have people asking me all the time, what about First Strike this champ, First Strike that champ? It's kind of a bait item on a lot of champs out there. However, with Kha'zix, it is really good because often you open up invisible on people, and doing that extra 10% true damage is really massive. But a lot of the other champs, there's a chance that you get hit first. So that is really nice. If you can get the drop on people, it is going to be handy. It's just going to be a standard Dustblade, Ghostblade. You really want the Dustblade with him, obviously, because every time you go invisible with his ult, you get that extra damage. Last 3 seconds dies it, and you become invisible. Oh, never mind. It doesn't so like it resets your passive. That's what it is. So you get Unseen Threat again every time you go invisible, and that spikes your passive for more damage. So he snowballs really well with this item. He always has. And then, Youmuu's just a gap close, make sure you're staying on top of people. Youmuu's did get a buff. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it did get a little bit of a buff a few patches ago. I think they gave it ability haste when it didn't used to have ability haste. So champions that use that item get a little bit better. So, again, it's nice for him that it is a bit quieter in the early game. He's not going to get invaded as often by Xin Zhao and Lee Sin and Shaco and all that stuff. You might see some of that going on, but he's going to get to farm relatively peacefully until 6. And then once he gets to 6, once he gets that invisibility is when he can start making those plays and start snowballing. And once he gets a few points in his queue, then he can start to duel some of these other junglers as well. Gets, maybe his first Sari to Dirk and 3 points in queue, then he can maybe start fighting. So I'm not a Kha'zix expert, but he is pretty good. The problem with Kha'zix is he really requires very precise target selection later on in the game. You have to get access to the back line, you have to get vision control, and you have to get really good flanks in order to tear up the back line. Because he's not a really good front-to-back fighter. If people know where you are, he's fairly easy to peel. And, of course, you're not going to get first strike if they see you. So you really, really want to be able to get the jump on people. So that means you need to be ahead. You need to have the vision down to make that happen. So very good if you have good game sense, if you can catch people out isolated, if you can get proper positioning. But you really have to be smart about it. You can't just run in there and bulldoze people like you can with Graves a lot of times. So that's why I have him just a little bit lower, just because he does require better game sense, better positioning than a lot of these other top end champions who can just don't have to rely as much on specific target access. Okay, and then Master Yi, obviously in a meta that's slowing down a little bit, where you're looking for high scaling champions, where there's not going to be as much pressure in the early game, Yi is going to do very well in that environment. So, obviously in like Diamond Plus, he's not going to be as strong, but once you go into Plat Minus, he's really good because if you don't stop him, in the early game, if he just gets to scale, everybody knows how that story ends. A lot of times with Yi, there will always be people out there. It's like, oh, just chain CC him, just kill him. But the problem is, when he gets to go untargetable, every time he gets a reset off of his Q, it can be very, very difficult to take him down when he's doing so much damage. Now, it looks like a lot of people are going for the Kraken Hail of Blades on him. Hail makes sense. I mean, you do want your damage up front. I'm still not entirely convinced on Kraken. Yeah, because like Shield Bow has 5% higher win rate. Because the thing is, if you just don't die, you just need to survive and get your win rate up. And yeah, I just... Like, this is cute, but it gives no survival stats whatsoever. Like, you're just going to get evaporated by a lot of champs. And if you notice, like, Sterix and Wit's End have much, much higher win rates right now. I mean, not like insanely high win rates, but like they are better. So I would probably rather just get Sterix if you're against a lot of AD, or just get Wit's End if you're against a decent amount of magic. The Shield Bow plus Wit's End, like we talked about in the ADC video, is an extremely powerful combination. It is really hard to kill somebody, especially with magic damage, when you have both of those. So I don't know. It's up to you. There are a lot of options that are really good. It looks like Wits is pretty good later, or Shield Bow. I'm not sold on Gensu's. This just takes a while to stack up in a fight, and it offers no defense, as I said before. So it's okay. I get it. It has a cute interaction with Kraken, and that is good if they have 2 or 3 tanks on their team. But if they don't, if you're going to be skirmishing a little bit more, I would probably rather just go for the Shield Bow. Like I said, Shield Bow Wits, Shield Bow Sterix, because you're still going to do a ton of damage as Master Yi, right? Whenever you activate your true damage, I think it's like your E, and then you go in with your W, or with your Q, and you just start slicing people up, you're still going to, just annihilate most squishy champions, and this is going to stop them from being able to burst you out. So I think that he is very strong, but again, you got to look for the right situations. Sometimes you have to wait a little bit for the enemy to use some of their hard CC depending on the team comp. So if they don't have a lot of CC, then he can be pretty good. But he does require a good chunk of gold and time, but you're getting more opportunities for that in this meta. And then Trundle's another one that I think is underrated, but can actually be pretty good. First of all, he has a fantastic matchup against Nunu, who is one of the best junglers right now. Now, Nunu's not like ultra popular, but he's good. And a lot more tanks are coming back, right? He's very good against Sion, who's becoming increasingly popular as well. I know Tyler One's been running Sion lately. Of course, you've got the boss over in EU running Sion. And so people are exploring that champion a bit more, both the AD version and the tank version. And I think he's a pretty decent champ right now. So Pillar just completely ruins Sion, completely ruins... blank it out. Nunu. Very good combination with stuff like Vayne, who's really strong right now as well. You put that pillar up, and then that, opens up an opportunity for Vayne to condemn somebody. So there are some champion-specific interactions that are really good right now. Just in general, just the itemization, and I think he got buffed fairly recently as well. I think it was maybe the attack speed on his W. He's just very good with a lot of the stuff that's going on. So Divine Sunder is fantastic on him. It's because you're going to be able to keep applying it, with your chomp over and over again. It's going to keep you sustained, combos really well with your W, and then it looks like a lot of people are going for this lethal tempo, which does give you up to 90% extra attack speed, and you get 50 range, which is pretty handy on AD champs. I think your Q gives you a little bit of extra range too. Maybe not. But, I mean, he's just going to be good in a long, sustained fight. He puts out good, reasonable sustained damage. He's got a lot of healing. He saps the enemy of their AD, which is handy, and then he shrinks the tanks, which this is a huge boon when you're trying to go against one of these massive Mundos becoming popular as well and has a good win rate. When you're going against stuff like Mundo, Sion, Nunu, Zac, just any number of tanks. Leona, he's very, very good against Aftershock champs because you take their Aftershock stats, and then once the Aftershock falls off, then they end up going negative on the stats from what they had initially. And especially Leona, because her W gives her stats and the Aftershock gives her stats. So he just pairs really well with a lot of other champs. His early game is not fantastic. It's okay. The pillar is decent if you're against something that doesn't have any flash or dash. So if you're like ganking a Jinx or something bot lane, that pillar is going to be tremendous. But he clears well. It's safe. He can take objectives fairly safely. Snowballs pretty well. I mean, he's just really solid right now overall. So I think Graves is kind of a tough matchup for him, but I think he does pretty well into most of the other champs that we mentioned. I might be wrong about the Graves, but I think Graves, if Graves doesn't have phase rush though, Trundle might be able to deal with that. But it's going to be good against, Vi and Warwick, especially Warwick. You can knock off the Warwick ultimate, make it annoying for him to run around. Vi, maybe a little bit less so. Kha'zix is probably kind of a tough matchup. I mean, I guess we could just look. Common matchups. So yeah, I mean, Lee Sin seems to crush Lee Sin. Vi, he has almost a 55% win rate against Vi, 53 against Graves. Like I said, Kha'zix is a little rougher. Pretty good win rate against Warwick. So a lot of these top-end champs, he's really good against. What's his Nunu matchup? Wow. Okay. I don't know how Nunu ever beats him. I've played this matchup from the Nunu side a lot, and it feels absolutely horrible. So I'm not sure how he's losing to Nunu. It's a pretty low sample size, but, anytime Nunu tries to snowball, you just pillar. And it's just hard for... You can pillar to knock him out of his ult, too. It's just hard to imagine how Nunu ever has a chance in that matchup. But either way, Trundle's got really good matchups against everything right now. So I think he's definitely worth considering. Zac is another one, and Zac's kind of weird. I get asked about Zac a decent chunk. Mostly is what do I think about support Zac, which I'm not a huge fan of. I know that there have been some other content creators that have tried to make it work, but Zac is a good beneficiary of Frostfire. It does some extra damage early on, just allows you to stick to people a little bit easier. So that part is really good. It's just he's very skill shot intensive. You have to hit your E, and it's fairly slow and fairly telegraphed. There are a lot of interactions that can stop this. It just depends on how good the enemy is a lot of times, right? So you've got Vayne can tumble out of it, Ezreal can E out of it, Lucian dash. I mean, anyone that's got a dash can potentially dodge the slingshot if they see it coming and if they react fast enough. And then anything that can disrupt stuff flying in also is going to be pretty useful. So a Janna tornado can knock him out of it. Gragas body slam can knock him out of it. Thresh can flay him out of it. But again, it just depends on the positioning and the skill level. So at higher skill levels, he's definitely going to fall off, I think. But at kind of the lower skill levels where people may not be anticipating it, maybe they don't have as good of vision coverage, and you're able to get some of these sneaky ganks. He does have one of the best ways to get around wards in the early game if you're positioned correctly and if you can control the vision enough. But otherwise, I mean, he's really hard to kill. He has great disruption with his R. I like how they still have the graphic from, the previous one where you would abduct people, which I thought was kind of a cool one. I kind of like the abduction better than the current Let's Bounce. I think that was more flavorful and interesting. But anyways, so if you hit your E's, you're a god. You do a ton of damage. Fantastic engage range. Really strong, but if you miss it, it can be kind of rough. Has pretty good clear, pretty good disruption with his Q. So he's just a good, solid pick overall. It's just there are more ways to interact with him, I think, than some of the other champs. Okay, and then we have Viego, which I wasn't sure if I should put him here or not, but this champ, I mean, if you get going on him, he is extremely powerful. He does have a lower win rate, kind of like Graves. You notice a lot of the tanks have the really high win rates. But if you do get ahead, yeah, I think just going for this shield bow plus wits end, as I've said over and over again, it's like peanut butter and jelly. It makes you almost impossible to kill, still puts up really good damage. It's just a very strong combination. Then you can go for Sterix Gauge. Now, I don't know who's getting Infinity Edge on him. I mean, I guess. It just feels really greedy on a melee champ to go for something that doesn't have defense. just because there's so many good damage defensive options right now. So a lot of people do like Blather and King, which is, okay. I would still rather get Wits or Sterix. Personally, I just don't like squishy melee champs, again, because there's so many good options where you still do a lot of damage without being squishy. So I would probably just go for Shield Bow, Wits, Sterix. You're just never going to die. You're going to still do pretty respectable damage. And that if you stay alive longer, it's more likely you're going to get kills and resets with that ultimate. So I think he's just really good. He gets more time. He doesn't have to fight early, so he gets time to actually get his ult and just start taking over games. So really good high snowball champion for later in the game. I'd probably prefer Graves right now as like a hard carry option, but Viego's still going to be really strong. And then the last one that I'll put up here is Xin Zhao. Just kind of out of respect, the early game has fallen off, but Xin does do like okay, I think, later on. He has kind of his moment there in the mid game. But he can be a pest, with his R. He can buy a lot of time for your team if you want to engage, start the fight, start putting up some damage. Obviously, if you can invade and pressure some of these junglers that are trying to power farm, he can snowball really hard in the early game. Highest win rate, you can probably guess what it's going to be, right? Shield Bow, and then either Wits End or Sterix every time. I guess Essence Reaver does do really well on him. So I guess like the hard carry build would probably be Eclipse Essence Reaver. But again, I would just go with some combination of tanky damage items that just make sense for the situation. Okay, and we're basically at 30 minutes, so we're pretty much out of time. A couple of other notable ones that I will mention, because I don't want this to go too long. Poppy has been gaining a lot of traction after Worlds. Her win rate is not as high as some of the other ones, but Predator Poppy is definitely a champion that can be very strong. She's super sticky. It's very hard to get away once she attaches to you and puts up her little circle thing that blocks mobility. Then she can be very strong. I think that Talon, with kind of a tankier Talon, like the Gore Drinker, Sterix Talon, I think that was running around, can be pretty good. I know I played that. The preseason has made that a bit worse. Like, his win rate has definitely gone down, but I still think that it's pretty good. Looks like people have gone back to just kind of the Ghostblade Eclipse build, which is okay. You do have better backline access than some of the other assassins out there. I think you have better or easier backline access than Kha'zix. Less raw power, less like, I'm going to delete you in 0.1 seconds, but more mobility. So he's pretty good, but you do have to snowball early on. Ivern, I don't remember what his win rate is, but it just feels like this is a kind of meta where Ivern would be really good with Moonstone. It's just such a powerful item right now in general. So his win rate is down. I can't remember if he got nerfed or what. But yeah, just the Moonstone and the Staff of Flowing Water can be pretty good if people don't pressure you early on. Now, he's not going to be as strong if you already have an Enchanter like a Sona or something on your team. But if you have like a Leona, someone else who can engage, and you've got, maybe one other tank on your team, your top lane is, playing Scion or something like that, mid lane's playing Malphite, then, maybe you can go for an Ivern. So I think he's a much more selective pick unless you one-trick him, but he can be all right. Lee Sin's okay. His win rate's about as low as it's been in a while, though. He can still pressure early, but he's just going to get outscaled by a lot of other champs. I think the Gore Drinker Sterix is still pretty good, but he just doesn't... It's harder for him to have that turbo hard carry unless you are just extremely good on him. Jarvan was pretty strong at Worlds, I think, but he's kind of fallen off a little bit. He does have good early game, potential. I think his win rate fell off a little bit, but yeah, Jarvan has really good utility, right? Being able to lock somebody in that circle is going to stop a lot of mobility. Now, there are some things where, they can still dash out of it, but like Vayne, for example, can't really tumble out of that very well. And then, of course, you can go for Gore Drinker Sterix, and you're going to be tanky. You're still going to do a lot of damage. He has the armor shred with his Q, which is very nice, especially up against tanks. And then he has his E, which is going to give everybody a little bit of extra attack speed. So he's okay. He just doesn't have any percentage health. He doesn't have any true damage. So his damage, his damage is going to be a bit on the lower end. That's why I'd probably rather play something like, Vi if you want the lockdown, or Trundle if you just want the disruption and the sustained damage. But he's still okay. And then some of these other champs are alright too. There are a lot of champions that are in that sort of 50 to 53% win rate that are definitely playable. But I guess we'll go ahead and call it there. I do think that some of the early game, like, squishy champs are kind of having a hard time right now. So, like, your Elise, your Nidalee, your Twitch, your Evelyn, your Kiana's, especially the magic damage users, just because so many people are going for Wit's End. And I think that's why Fiddlesticks has fallen off quite a bit, too, win rate-wise. It's just Wit's End and Shield Bow. It's just, like, impossible to kill anybody. Especially, if they have any other sort of lifesteal or sustain or any other type of, damage mitigation, you're just never killing anybody past level 2, pretty much. So that just really feels bad. So, like I said from the outset, you really want stuff that's going to have, solid sustained damage that's also going to have that bit of tankiness about them that scales really well with the enchanters and kind of the longer metagame that we're in right now. But anyways, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Have a good day, and I'll see you next time.